South Africa, the land of sunshine, the land van sonskyn. And I welcome you to the opening day of what promises to be an historic 4th World Conference on Doping in Sport here in Johannesburg. My name is Dr. Victor Ramathisire, Chairperson of the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport, and I'll be your Program Director for this much-anticipated opening session. The World Conference, which began yesterday, the 12th of November, and concludes this Friday, November the 15th, has been organized by the World Anti-Doping Agency, along with the general support of the Sports and Recreation South Africa and the City of Johannesburg. Welcome to our committed representatives from all over the world, the sport movement, public authorities, the anti-doping community, athletes, observers and the media, all of you who have convened here in Johannesburg to review the major advances made in the fight against doping in sport in recent years, and to discuss the strategy for the crucial years ahead of us. We are honored to be joined by several distinguished speakers who will officially welcome you and officially open the 4th World Conference on Doping in Sport. But first, let us welcome the Minister of Sports and Recreation in the Republic of South Africa, Honorable Minister Fikile Mbalula, to say a few words. Over to you, Minister.
Thank you, Program Director. Honorable President of the World Anti-Doping Agency, Mr. John Fay, and the WADA family. President of the International Olympic Committee, Mr. Thomas Bach, and the board members present here this morning. Former Minister of Sports and Recreation South Africa, Dr. Reverend Makhenkesi Stofile, Deputy Minister of Sports, Mr. Gert Westhuizen, ministers and deputy ministers across the world and in the African continent present here today, and all our guests, leaders of the sport and anti-doping movement, all international federations represented in this conference, sportsmen and women, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. I greet you all in the name of being true and playing fair. As the President of WADA, the Honorable John Fay, puts it, it is important that WADA evolves with the times in order to meet the challenges presented by an ever-changing world, and in particular the growing sophistication of those who dope and those who help them dope, close quote. It is in this regard that we value the opportunity WADA has given the sports movement towards the review of the World Anti-Doping Code. It is important that all of us identify with the code and make it work in our various countries towards the betterment of sports and recreation of a wider culture of playing through in society. Hence, the government of the Republic of South Africa and the sport fraternity will recall our contribution towards the consolidation of the World Anti-Doping Code consultation processes to protect the image of sport and health of our athletes. We supported all efforts of the World Anti-Doping Movement by leading Africa during the consultation process for the practical review of the code and the integration of its provisions. We did so as part of the world movement to fight cheating in sport and enforce the value of playing fair and true play. For us as a country, hosting this conference will not only help intensify the fight against doping in the world, but will also help our country to fight all forms of cheating, misconduct, and dishonesty in sport and other avenues of life in society. We are indeed humbled by the confidence expressed by the World Anti-Doping Agency towards South Africa to organize and host a conference of this magnitude. Today, on matters of anti-doping, South Africa is the leading example in Africa in the fight against doping in sport. We are excited to be counted amongst the community of nations for having put in place instruments and standards that are getting to fighting the scourge of doping in sports. Today, we are rejuvenated to be compared to countries like Switzerland, Denmark, and Madrid, who are previous hosts of this historic conference. It is true that the conference the world has shown in South Africa, the confidence the world has shown in South Africa is because of our track record to fight doping and have capacity to host this majestic gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, this conference brings with it important reputational and economic opportunities for our country. And the little price we can afford to repay WADA's belief in us is to take our commitment to the fight against doping in sports to another level and continue to support SAIDS, our Institute for Drug-Free Sport, through which we will spearhead efforts to further build anti-doping capacity and assist with development of effective anti-doping programs in the country. As government, we have not been passive bystanders to the abuses taking place in sport today. Governments across the globe have instituted various legislative and other measures to promote fair play. The South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport Act of 1997, the Safety at Sports and Recreational of 2010, and the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities 2004 are but three examples where the government of South Africa is intervening to promote the values of fair play. But legislation alone cannot bring about fair play. It is us who have to implement the legislation, monitor its use, and comply with its stipulation, who can in a big way play through and say no to doping, not only for words' sake, but as our commitment to bringing back the much-needed integrity in our sports. We need to strengthen our work and build our capacity in scientific research to fight doping as the promoters of doping are strengthening their capacity through technology. We need to move with speed on education and training about the consequences of drug use in sport, especially on matters of health aspect of doping. We also need to build our capacity in investigation of cases. Here in South Africa, the good work that our sister departments of health, education, as well as the police against drug and alcohol abuse should be applauded. And we must continue our noble war against drug and alcohol abuse. We must do this as a testimony to the commitment displayed by the government of the Republic in the war against substance abuse. In order to show this total interest and uncompromising stance against doping in sport, South Africa is a signatory to a number of international agreements that are solemnly aimed at the war against doping in sport. Among them, we signed the Copenhagen Declaration on Anti-Doping in Sport, ratified the UNESCO Convention on Doping, as well as represented Africa with diligence in both the WADA Executive Committee and Foundation Board. Our country has also provided leadership in Africa in the implementation of anti-doping strategies and became a leading example in the fight against doping in sport. We have also contributed immensely in the resource mobilization for other African countries that lack necessary resources to fund our glorious war against doping in sport. We are here this morning after a successful sports law conference that ended on Monday in Cape Town, where thought-provoking discussions took place. Among them, match fixing and how sponsors should play a role in demanding proper governance and the fight against doping. It is important for the business sector to be seen to be part of the arsenal against doping in sports, so that a message that says if winning is to be at all costs, the cost must be legal and fair. To this effect, we support WADA's belief that a long-term solution to preventing doping is through effective values based on education programs that can foster anti-doping behaviors and create a long anti-doping culture. This World Conference provides an avenue for our country and continent to share valuable information with its youth about the effect and impact of doping in sport. As we continue to learn from the information widely distributed by WADA in order for countries to effectively implement the anti-doping education programs by anti-doping organizations, the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport and the Central Drug Authority have shown their commitment in this cause and assisted in mobilizing communities behind the vision of drug-free society and put education and awareness programs at the center of their strategies. We must, as nations of the world, create an environment that will ensure that when future generations reflect on our times, they will point to our sport fields, courts, and wherever they will be playing and say, this is where honesty, integrity, honor, valor, and truthfulness prevailed and must continue to prevail. We trust that whatever kind of review effects to the World Anti-Doping Code will even better and harmonize anti-doping struggles across all sports and all governments. To the delegates from beyond our borders, we have no doubt that you will feel the warmth of our people, the warm temperatures of our spring, and the overall hospitality of our country. I thank you, and again, welcome to South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your warm welcome, Honorable Minister Mbalula. You have really set the tone for this event, emphasizing that legislation alone is not going to win our war against doping in sport, but it is indeed a collaborative effort between governments, the sporting fraternity, big business, as you just said, as well as other formations of society in general. And now may we please hear from the President of the International Olympic Committee, Mr. Thomas Bach. Over to you, Mr. Bach.
Dear President Fehi, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends, ladies and gentlemen. It is all about the athletes. To be more precise, it is all about the clean athletes. That is why we are here today for the 4th World Conference on Doping in Sport. First of all, I would like to thank you very much, our South African hosts, for their great hospitality and offering us a splendid opportunity to step up and strengthen our common fight against doping in sport here in Johannesburg. Our joint efforts have one goal. We want to protect the vast majority of the athletes, that is to say, all those who compete in the spirit of fair play. Protecting these clean athletes must be our ultimate goal. It must have top priority in all our decisions and initiatives. For this reason, we have to adjust our approach and bring about a change in mentality. So, for example, we should not extrapolate the cost of a positive test from the cost of all the tests carried out. We should not then argue that one positive test costs several $100,000. That would be like saying a terrorist attack at an airport costs us so many millions of dollars. Because the fight against doping is like security measures. It is also about deterrence and prevention. For this reason, our security measures, and so our tests, must be improved still more. Tests are an indispensable means to the end of protecting the clean athletes. They are not an end in itself. What we need is the greatest possible deterrence. All of us gathered here in Johannesburg are united in our zero-tolerance attitude to doping. The IOC will continue to pursue this fight with great determination and clear measures. On the final day of this conference, we shall know the name of the new WADA president. Some say they already know him today, but let's see. But anyway, he will take over on 1st of January next year. The IOC looks forward to even broadening and strengthening our intensive cooperation with the new leadership of WADA. In the worldwide fight against doping, we need even closer cooperation with all the stakeholders. These include the government authorities and anti-doping organizations at national, regional and international level. All of us, especially WADA, should increase the cooperation with government agencies which means establishing precisely what each partner can and should be doing in an agreed division of responsibilities. The IOC supports any means of improving this cooperation if it generally strengthens the fight against doping and it does not weaken the foundations of this fight, such as the strict liability principle, the whereabouts information system, and the international arbitration in sport, which we need to ensure the worldwide application of sanctions. We need a better exchange of information between state authorities, the sports movement, and the national anti-doping organizations. We expect governments to create better conditions for cooperation with sport, especially in terms of exchange of information. This also means that the state authorities must do more to severely punish those behind the scenes in doping cases: the dealers, the agents, coaches, doctors, scientists, and all others involved in doping activities. For its part, the Olympic movement has repeatedly called for the sporting sanctions imposed in serious doping cases to be strengthened. As an athlete, like my then friends in the IOC Athletes Commission, I strongly argued for a lifetime ban, even for a first doping offense. But over the course of time, my legal colleagues have made me realize that this is not possible. What is possible, however, is an increase in regular sanctions from 2 to 4 years for serious violations, which the IOC is calling for on behalf of the sport stakeholders in WADA. I strongly urge to accept this increase and the other suggested amendments to the WADA code to improve the fight against doping. But even a much improved code is not enough by itself. We are in sports, and in sports we know what counts is the result on the field. We need even more sophisticated targeted tests, more individual profiling, and more scientific research. We should be focusing more on anti-doping research. Also in this area, we should be open to new ways of thinking. Is it not time to find out, for example, whether blood and urine tests are really the best and ultimate solution? Might there be other testing methods which are even more reliable, more sustainable, more effective, and maybe even less intrusive? But it is also true that in our common fight against doping, we can be successful only if we link a system of prevention and sanctions. For this reason, we welcome all measures aimed at avoiding doping in the first place. Such preventive measures must be applied as early as possible in an athlete's career. But it is not just for the athletes themselves. Their entourage and their family members must also be included. To achieve this, WADA should work even more closely with the national Olympic committees and the international federations. They, in turn, should sit down with their members, the national federations, with clubs and youth organizations to develop and introduce effective doping prevention programs. The IOC's determination in this fight against doping is clear from our drastically enhanced anti-doping program for the Olympic Winter Games, Sochi 2014. The IOC will make greater use of information from sport and anti-doping agencies around the world and apply targeted testing both outside and during the competitions. After 30th of January, when the Olympic Village is open, testing will once again cover the full in-competition menu of prohibited substances and methods. With a record number of samples and pre-competition tests, we shall be smarter and tougher in our fight against doping than at any previous Olympic Winter Games. We shall perform these tests anywhere in the world as a more effective, more flexible, better deterrent. We will improve our anti-doping system with regard to both quality and quantity. In order to achieve this, the IOC has increased the number of pre-competition tests from 804 in Vancouver to 1,269 for Sochi. That is an increase of 57%. In all, we will perform 2,453 tests compared with 2,149 in Vancouver. That is an increase of 14% with a special focus on team sports. In addition, as at previous games, we shall keep all the Sochi samples for at least 8 years, perhaps longer, pending the outcome of your conference. During that time, the samples may be reanalyzed at any time if new methods of identifying prohibited substances are developed. This has already proved successful at previous games in terms of both deterrence and subsequent sanctions. The IOC alone will be spending more than $1 million on pre-competition testing outside Sochi, transport, storage, and retesting. In addition to that, for the games themselves, many millions of dollars will be spent on building and running laboratories, analysis, and services. But to be very clear, dear friends and colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, to be very clear, these millions of dollars are not expenses. They are an investment into the future of our sport. And the future of sport will greatly depend on our success in this fight against doping, any kind of manipulation, and related corruption. Because all these measures have to serve to protect the clean athletes. That is our real goal. We want to ensure a fair competition. The clean athletes, they deserve our full commitment and determination. The IOC's commitment and determination does not end with the closing ceremony of the Sochi Olympic Winter Games. I will, together with the IOC Executive Board in December and the IOC session in February, consider further measures in this fight. For the sake of the clean athletes and all of us, I hope that our common zero-tolerance commitment in the fight against doping will be the hallmark of this 4th World Conference on Doping and Sport, and I wish you every success.
Thank you very much to Mr. Thomas Bach, President of the International Olympic Committee, emphasizing that it is all about the athlete and protecting the clean athlete. And I'm almost certain that very few in the House will disagree that we all look forward to all your measures that you have outlined this morning on how the IOC is going to be smarter and tougher is going to increase on the quality and quantity of its fight against doping in sport. And interesting that we want to keep samples for 8 years or even more, dependent on the outcomes of this particular conference. Ladies and gentlemen, let us now welcome the Chairman and President of the World Anti-Doping Agency, the man who has championed the fight against doping in sport for the last 6 years, the Honorable Mr. John Fahey.
Minister Mbalula, ISC President Thomas Bach, executive and board members of WADA, and distinguished guests from the anti-doping community, each and every one of you. I thank you for your attendance here, and I begin by thanking our generous and convivial hosts for this conference, the Minister for Sport, Fikile Mbalula, the Mayor of Johannesburg, Mr. Parks Tau, and I also thank our conference partners, Sport and Recreation South Africa and the City of Johannesburg, for the considerable efforts that you have made to ensure the success of this conference. Above all, I would like to express our thanks to the South African government for inviting and welcoming the anti-doping community to your country. South Africa's love of all things sport is known worldwide, and where better to hold an event of this magnitude than in the city that has hosted World Cup finals in both football and rugby in recent years. I would like to recognise all the participants who have gathered here for the 4th World Conference on Doping in Sport. Approximately 1,000 individuals representing the sport movement, government, the anti-doping community, athletes, observers and the media. You are all here because you care about this issue, which at the end of 2013 is still the greatest threat to sport. Your very presence here signifies your commitment to the clean athletes of the world through the eradication of athletes who cheat. But I particularly welcome to the conference the new president of the ISC, Thomas Bach. President Bach has demonstrated on numerous occasions in the past his strong anti-doping credentials, and his words of wisdom this morning, his words of resolve, were unambiguous and strong, and I thank you for that. And I also place on record the unswerving belief and assistance provided by your predecessor, Dr. Jacques Rogge, from the time the WADA Code was approved in Copenhagen back in 2013. We are here at this historic 4th World Conference on Doping in Sport to enhance and strengthen the future of anti-doping in sport. But before we talk about the future, it is helpful to recap on some of the advances made throughout WADA's short history. In only 14 years, much has already been achieved because of the unwavering commitment, dedication, and single-mindedness of many good people in our ranks. 14 years ago, the separate worlds of sport and government joined together to create an independent international solution to combat doping in sport. And that agency was the World Anti-Doping Agency, and with it, the Code. The creation and adoption in 2003 of that code should not be underestimated. A single set of anti-doping rules for all athletes, all sports and all countries. It was a groundbreaking move, and it has underpinned our achievements thus far. It is all the more remarkable because of the unique partnership between government and sport worldwide through this code. There have been many more achievements since then. We now have more intelligent and comprehensive testing programs in place. Testing programs that I believe will be further enhanced upon the ratification of the revised code. We have a code compliance reporting process. We have education programs that have come on in leaps and bounds, and numerous education tools available to help stakeholders and inform and guide the youth of the world. The WADA Athlete Outreach Program is being adopted by international federations and NADOs all over the world. As a community, we are more collaborative than ever before. WADA has collaborated with the pharmaceutical industry to help the detection of substances that could be abused by athletes. We've also formed close alliances with the law enforcement bodies in numerous countries of the world and with peak bodies such as Interpol and the World Customs Organization. Finally, non-analytical anti-doping methods have become just as valuable, just as effective as the more traditional anti-doping techniques of testing backed up by science. Since coming into force on the 1st of January 2004, the Code has proved itself as a powerful and effective tool in the fight against doping in sport. The Code, however, was never meant to be set in stone. Experience shows us that we can all do better, we can all be more effective, and rules must adapt to permit a more effective outcome. For this reason, the Code and the review of the Code and the related international standards process was launched some 2 years ago. The collaborative and coordinated approach has allowed all stakeholders to voice their views, to have their say. The process has involved 4 rounds of consultation and 4 successive draft versions for the Code and 2 draft versions for the standards. There has been some great input along the way. And of course, the whole process has been made transparent and public through the WADA website. The final draft was published 1 month ago in anticipation of this World Conference and the meeting of WADA's Financial Board, which will be held of WADA's Foundation Board, which will be held this Friday. The final draft is the result of all your valuable contributions. And because of your ideas and suggestions, I know we will have a strong code and standards for the Foundation Board to approve. It's been 24 months, 4 phases, and almost 4,000 proposed changes, but we've almost arrived at the end result. A revised blueprint that will enable the fight against doping in sport to be more effective than ever before. We must continue to evolve, to be innovative, and to work together. There is no room for complacency, whether you represent sport, whether you represent athletes or government or anti-doping organisations or national Olympic committees. My sincere request to all of you is to focus this week on what is in the best interest of the clean athletes of the world. What will guide and support the youth of today into a healthy and rewarding tomorrow? Whether you represent team sport or sport involving individual competitors, whether you represent a government with a first world economy or a government with a third world economy, support the rules that will best serve the young people of all nations and all sports throughout the world. This week, we have a chance to enhance the inherent quality of sport, which is enshrined in the concept of fair play. I am confident, through your goodwill and commitment, this will happen. I conclude by wishing each and every one of you a rewarding and satisfying experience throughout this conference, and I thank you very, very sincerely for the contribution each and every one of you makes. Thank you.